So Fed Chair Jerome Powell just made a statement regarding Trump economy, and it looks like we're heading towards stagflation, if not recession. That's the subject of today's video. These are the headlines coming from Bloomberg. Powell signals Fed still on hold, so that would be no rate cuts or hikes, wary of persistent price shock. And this is what it reads. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell said the economic impact of the new tariffs, right? So that's the whole Trump trade war, is likely to be significantly larger. So the impacts are likely to be significantly larger than expected, and the central bank must make sure that doesn't lead to a growing inflation problem. Now, if you've been following the markets, you'll know it's been crashing the last couple of days, and effectively, markets don't like surprises. Markets don't like tariffs, and I can safely say markets don't like Trump. I'm looking at this for myself here. I mean, it's pretty much all red. You do have a few green candles out there, which we'll talk about in a moment here regarding possible trade deals in Vietnam. But I think that's a long shot. Part of what's going on here is that there's just shows the real problem, deep cultural and economic problems in USA. And I've talked about this stuff several times in the channel. I understand MAGA doesn't get it at all. They think all these manufacturing jobs are going to come back to the USA, but it is, in my opinion, very unlikely. This is the quote from Powell. While uncertainty remains elevated, it is now becoming clear that the tariff increases will be significantly larger than expected. That's from Powell. He said so on Friday. The same is likely to be true of economic effects, which will include higher inflation and slower growth. You're looking at stagflation, right? Higher inflation, slower growth. We just need those unemployment numbers to tick up, and you're looking at a time maybe back at like 1970s, 1980s stuff. If you guys lived through these things, the Carter, Reagan things, years, you'll probably remember these things. It can get really ugly. Now, what's interesting about this time, though, like where we are right now, interest rates are relatively low. I mean, there was a time when double digit interest rates wasn't out of the question, but right now it's relatively low. And that's the thing that Trump's always going to be angry about. He wants the Fed to, cut rates, get that, borrowing going again, and let's get that cycle and house of cards building up. But I mean, you can only print so long, and you can only borrow, so much. If we're all borrowing and there's no growth and no one's buying, I mean, I guess we borrow more. Is that the plan? And then on top of that, Trump's idea is that we're going to go into even more deficit spending, cut taxes, I guess, for the wealthy, increase taxes for the poor. A lot of this stuff, it doesn't make sense. And that's, I mean, I think you guys know this stuff. We talked about for a long time. And I mean, doesn't make sense in terms of Trump's strategy to get everything going again. It's really just get everything going for him and his billionaire buddies. And I feel like when I went through this today, that they want to take us back to like the 1800s now. Before I was saying 1930s. I think we're going further back than that. It says here, despite that view in a question and answer session following his speech, Powell emphasized the central bank doesn't need to hurry, right? So we're not making any moves here to adjust interest rates as policymakers wait for more clarity on administration's policies and their impact. This is a Wall Street Journal headline. Powell warns of higher prices, weaker growth after tariff plan. I mean that's the theme all around. When Powell comes out and says things are bad in the way that he is, because he usually tries to stay relatively neutral, this really spooks the markets. Powell's tone was more cautious than his, that's what I was just thinking. Powell's tone was more cautious than his March 19th press conference when he said inflationary impact of the tariffs was expected to be transitory, meaning temporary. It's not looking like that right now at the moment. I mean, he's saying here, quote, while higher tariffs are likely to generate at least a temporary rise in inflation, it is possible that the effects could be more persistent, right? So basically, remember Trump ran on, I'm going to bring the price of eggs down and we're all going to be awesome. Not so much. I mean, and this isn't necessarily a shock. Nobel Prize-winning economists were saying this before the election, and I know the election's come and gone, but I just want to emphasize that this is nothing necessarily surprising. I think the only thing that's really surprising is how big the tariffs are came out to be when Trump announced it. It was on way above what the average estimates were. And also how surprisingly incompetent Trump and Musk are, like even more incompetent than I even thought, to be honest. So yeah, there's some surprises there to the downside, not necessarily in a good way. Also says here, he then stressed the Fed action will be focused on arresting any rise in public perceptions and inflation was slipping out from the Fed's control. So, oh God. Okay, so if you ever watched this Fed stuff before, and I watched a little bit, and he tries to talk kind of a monotone, sort of calm manner. But when they're saying stuff like this, we got to like keep public perception under control. That we're under control. I mean, that's not a great sign, right? I'll read it again. He then stressed the Fed action will be focused on arresting any rise in public perceptions that inflation was slipping for the Fed's control, right? So we're worried the public's gonna panic and freak out. Now, actually, people were making some purchases ahead of time before the tariffs kick in, and I'll be curious in your neck of the woods if you guys are doing that as well. If you're like, you know what, I feel uncertain about my economic future, but I am eyeing a TV and I don't want prices to go up on my, said TV. So I might as well get it now because, I mean, if the tariffs are going to kick in and kick in for longer, I mean, you might be looking at significant price increases. I'll give you an example, and I can't speak to the TV price exactly, but I've seen estimates on, say, average increase of like an iPhone could be a couple hundred, $200 to $300, that kind of thing, which is fairly significant. Considering, I mean, even now, I think iPhones are already overpriced. And full disclosure, I like iPhone, I have an iPhone, but I think it's overpriced. That's sort of the market we're in. But, would I want to buy a new iPhone if it were, say, 20% higher than I already pay? Probably not. We were talking about getting the next year's one. I was like, okay, fine, we'll get, because I think we skipped a couple cycles. I don't know. I think I got like a 2022 one or something like that. The thing is, these days, technology can last, a relatively good amount of time, and you just wait as long as you can before upgrading because there's nothing really that I need to upgrade for, and that's a struggle for. I'm just talking about in terms of tech companies. That's the struggle these days, or car companies, is to convince you to buy a new phone, buy a new car every year. But if like prices are through the roof, no, I'm gonna run that car as long as I possibly can, that's what's up. And so yeah, I'll be curious. Your neck of the woods is just like people around you. Do they know what's going on with the tariffs? Do they know what the Fed? If you watch my channel, but I'm just curious if people around you are aware of what's going on. This also says here, from FedFoul, our obligation is to keep longer-term inflation expectations well anchored and to make certain that a one-time increase in the price level does not become an ongoing inflation problem. I keep talking about inflation being a long-running thing. We are well positioned to wait for greater clarity before considering any adjustment to our policy stance. Yeah, Trump's not going to like that. Ahead of Powell's remarks, President Trump said he hoped the Fed would cut rates. He is always late, but he could now change his image and quickly. Yeah, that's what Trump wants. Please cut rates, Powell. But that's not really going to help inflation. It could actually make it worse. So that's why we're talking about inflation here. As you guys know, China did reciprocal tariffs. That's why the market is crashing. I made a video about this earlier. 34% on U.S. goods. Trump put pretty high tariffs on countries like Vietnam, Cambodia. Theoretically, Trump could cut a deal with Vietnam. I say theoretically because I want to go through the details of this one. But the whole point would be, do you think that the jobs that, say, talk about Nike, and I mentioned Nike in the prior video, do you think those Nike manufacturing jobs are going to come back to the USA? That's just a fundamental question. I don't see it happening myself. I just let's see what Trump and stuff. Let's see what they're up to. It says apparel shoemakers shares tumbled Thursday after the president unveiled a 46% levy on the Southeast Asian nation, where several had shifted manufacturing in recent years after Trump hit China with levies during his first term, right? So the Nike shares are down, 14%. They were up in that one chart I showed you, but I think they recovered maybe on the, there's a possible deal, but I'm curious what the deal would be. Trump said Friday on his social media that he'd had a, quote, very productive call with Vietnamese leader Lam, who said the country wants to, quote, cut their tariffs to zero, okay. Vietnam, which has a trade surplus of more than $123 billion with the U.S., has worked to soothe Trump since it re-entered the White House in January by urging purchase of U.S. goods and cutting its own tariffs of U.S. cars, ethanol, and liquefied natural gas. See, the problem is with this, and if you guys don't know, and I was born in Vietnam. We lived in Vietnam. We lived in Saigon, actually. That was a few years ago. And anyone who's ever been to Vietnam, you'll know this. They don't drive cars in the same what's the right word percentage as say Americans. Actually, it's motorbikes. And Honda is everywhere there. And so, like, are we going to try to sell American cars to Vietnamese? I mean, I'm serious. It's like it's a motorbike country. A lot of the countries, like I think Indonesia probably fits in that. Motorbike brands, Honda is a dominant. You could talk about Vespa maybe, which you don't see Vesta motorbikes or Vespas like in the USA. It's a different, it's a really really different market, right? So I don't know if like we're gonna cut a deal that we're gonna start making Ford motorbikes in USA and send them to Vietnam. I mean, is that what we're talking about here, or we're gonna try to convince all these consumers around the world who are motorbike consumers to suddenly start buying Teslas? Is that what we're gonna do? I mean, I think that's quite a stretch, and that's what I'm saying. The Trump people, I don't think they're thought this through. That's a lot of stuff that the Trump people or the MAGA people, they don't really get with this world here. It's a big place, guys, and not everyone wants to drive a Tesla. I'll put it that way. Also says here, okay, Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh said shortly after Trump returned to the office that he'd be willing to visit him at Mar-a-Lago. Golf all day long would settle these trade squabbles. So that's where we are in the presidency these days, is where Vietnamese leaders are like, you know what, if I have to go golf with Trump, I'll go do it. But like, but Trump keeps promising his MAGA followers that he's going to bring these manufacturing jobs back, and that's what I'm saying. It's like, do you really think Nike manufacturing jobs are going to come to the USA? Are Americans going to want to work in shoe companies? I just don't see it happening. I think to be fair, I think theoretically we could bring these manufacturing jobs back and then have people from south of the border come work these jobs, or really cut wages to where there's no other job in America. And I guess we send everything, like I said, back to 1800s and go back to that kind of country where a lot of people are working jobs that we haven't done for a long time. When President Trump imposed tariffs on Chinese imports during the first term, apparel brands turned to Plan B, moving production to parts of Asia, including Vietnam, Cambodia, Bangladesh. Now they need a Plan C. I think it was saying here that it would cost double to make clothes in USA. I think that's what I read. It says here Chris Ricobono, the founder, executive chairman of apparel company Untuckit, said he was considering moving production out of Vietnam, where 40% of his shirts, pants, and jackets are made. On his list of possibilities are Peru and Mauritius, where he'd already make some goods and tariffs lower. The new tariff on Peru is 10%. So, I mean, they're even saying that if we did, if tariffs are too high in Vietnam, we'll just move it to Peru. I mean, the idea that it's going to come back to the USA, I think is pretty unlikely. That's what I keep telling you guys. And H&M makes clothes over there, etc. in various countries, and they're talking about these type of jobs, right? Is that really going to come back to the USA? And I'm telling you guys, it would cost double to do it in US. I do remember this brand was called American Apparel. If you guys remember this one, you can let me know. But their prices just came in too high. It wasn't worth it. And I was looking at this. I've told you guys this before. The wage difference is just so great. A quick Google search says here, average Vietnamese worker is at $300 a month. And if you want to go to the higher Vietnamese workers, so that'd be 12,000 a year. That'd be the highest, I guess, average salary. That'd be like in the bigger cities. And then I was thinking, like, for example, we mentioned the theoretically, let's say use illegal immigrant workers. I know Trump is deporting these people, but I said theoretically, the average salary of a illegal immigrant in USA would be $36,000 a year. Average American salary, I guess, is what a median, I guess, is $50,000. So it's just the salary disparities are so great, and theoretically you could do it, because remember, the Republicans don't like minimum wage. So if you can get Americans to do these jobs, maybe. I'm just saying maybe, but I think that's unlikely. It would be pricey proposition because of higher U.S. labor costs. Making jeans in Los Angeles is twice as expensive as it is in Vietnam. He's thinking about adopting a hybrid model where he cuts and sews the jeans in Vietnam and washes them in U.S. A move he hopes would lower his tariff bill. So theoretically, we could go to some sort of situation where we assemble clothes in USA. I say theoretically, and this is something that I was thinking about. I had to look this one up because I wasn't sure. What's our cotton production these days? And like I said, this don't talk about this stuff that often. This is the headline from Bloomberg: Cotton demand from U.S. textile mills drops to lowest since 1885. And these days we use machines to pick cotton. I understand you guys get this. You understand. If suddenly Trump and Musk are like, "Hey guys, we got jobs. We're gonna all send you back to picking cotton." I mean, that would have massive cultural implications to Americans. Yeah, you guys know the cultural meaning of that kind of thing, and I promise you that would have major backlash. But that's the world that Trump and Musk are I guess, want to roll back and say, "Hey, we're going to bring back the jobs in the fields again. Welcome to the America of 1800s." And I we know this from the stuff that Trump must tweet out, the way that they treat people, the people that they like to hire, the people they don't want to hire. And if that's the jobs that we're bringing back, I mean, that's, I guess, for some people's point of view, right? If you're Trump and Musk, and if you look at Musk's platform, and I'll just be honest, it's Nazi kind of stuff. That's the world that they're taking us and rolling us back into. So I'll just say this. I'll just make it blunt. Let's just get Trump and Musk out of office as soon as possible and get some more sanity back to the USA. That's my opinion on this stuff. I want to hear your thoughts, and I'll catch you on the next video.